Welcome to another episode of the Wandering Road podcast. For today's episode, I'm joined by one of my friends, Dean. And for today's show, we're going to talk about AI, artificial intelligence. Hey, Dean, welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you.
Great to be here, Chris.
So, AI, man, when you approached me with this topic, I was like, man, I don't know much about AI other than, hey, we use them, in video games, phones, stuff like that. Let's just jump right into it, man. So, why don't we give the audience a little bit of background about AI and what's so special about it?
Well, unfortunately, I probably know about as much as you, but the reason why this is so interesting to me is because of all the news and possible future scenarios that are coming out, and pretty much good and bad and upside down. And I guess the real question is this going to be, really awesome for our future, or is this going to completely set the world on fire in the next 50 years or so? Because there's a lot of stuff coming down the pike in terms of technology, AI included, that I think is going to give humanity a run for its money. But I wanted to talk about the positive aspect of AI first, because I am in the camp. I believe more that AI is probably going to be a benefit for humanity. I think one way we're going to see AI break out in a positive way is going to be in video games. And I don't know if anybody saw this, but there was a video that came out recently. Let's see, today is the 28th of April. I think it came out 2 or 3 days ago. There was a young man who posted a video where he uploaded Chat GPT 4 or 5, whatever the most updated version is. He uploaded it into a VR video game, and he was recording from inside the VR headset. And he had linked it up to a non-playable character, NPC character, who was a monk, I believe. And they were essentially sitting next to a lake at sunset. Beautiful scenery, semi-realistic. But the craziest part was that he had linked this AI chatbot to the NPC, and he set parameters to the character to where he can tell the chatbot to look at a certain location within the three-dimensional space of VR, and it would actually look there. So it's like, hey, what do you think about the lake? Hey, so-and-so, what do you think about the sunset? And the actual character would look at him, look at where he was talking about, and then come up with a thoughtful response. And the craziest thing to me isn't necessarily the fact that the chat bot can look around in three-dimensional space. That is pretty awesome. But the craziest thing is how quickly the chat bot came back and responded to him. And I actually showed my wife this too, where we went into ChatGPT, the beta website or whatever, and I would type in a question for it, like a pretty complex question, maybe like a philosophical question or something. And it would come back with a very thoughtful response in 3 seconds. And this is the most nascent stage of AI. And that just blows my mind. So that's where I'm starting at with this conversation. I think we're going to go in the right direction, but I think that there's going to have to be a lot of oversight and a lot of checks and balances before we potentially, blow ourselves up.
So I'll preface this by saying to the people that are listening today, this is all based off of our opinions on AI. So we're not AI experts. We're not technological engineers or anything of that sort. So we're just chopping this up here. What our thoughts are about AI and the potential future and how it could affect our present day world. Because I'll tell you, Dean, I did not know that video existed or that anyone actually tried that. And what was the name of that program again? The chatbot GPT?
It's Chat GPT. Yeah.
Chat GPT. Okay. Yeah. It's funny enough, my, I guess, exposure to the Chat GPT was through a South Park episode where they were using Chat GPT to essentially answer test questions and do essays and whatnot. And it's funny because for those of you that are not South Park fans, there's this one character called Stan. He was using Chat GPT to respond to his girlfriend's text messages.
Just like
And it
Clyde.
was
Clyde was nailing it, right?
right.
Was it
Yeah.
Clyde? It was Clyde, right?
Yeah, I think it was Clyde that told him that. And basically they were using it to their advantage. And they got super lazy that they were just using this AI to respond for them, that nobody knew what the AI had said. Only the fact that the people on the other side were giving them positive reinforcement. So that encouraged them to use it even more. So my thing is, like, thinking about AI from that perspective, do you think it'll make people complacent?
I honestly think that people are already complacent. I think that I mean, you and I grew up well, I think I'm a little older than you, but you grew up in the 90s, the late 90s, and I didn't fall far behind that time period. So what I remember coming up in the 90s and the early 2000s was, this is the same rehashed crap with AI as we experienced with the internet. When the internet started blowing up and Google got popular and search engines and all that stuff, and phones started popping up in the classroom, not a lot of people remember that this whole worry about students using Google to cheat and, basically helping them research papers more easily, and teachers not being able to keep up and figure out which papers were stolen, or what's that word again? Where you
Plagiarized?
Yeah, plagiarized. Thank you. Plagiarized papers. However, over time, we came up with mechanisms and methods to detect that. So I remember, you and I went to the same school and the same undergrad, and I remember there was a story about a student who got caught plagiarizing, and the way that they found out was the teacher had some very quick resource to plug in a paper, and it would essentially scour their websites or the internet to see if there was anything copy and pasted, and the paper was essentially copy and pasted, and that person got dropped from the class, and they had to repeat it at some point later. So essentially, I think the same thing is already happening with AI. I think students who are using them to write papers in seconds and turn them in and get an A, I think teachers are already catching on to that. And I've seen some programs that allow teachers to plug them into these papers into and get us. The crazy thing, though, the unfortunate part of this is there's no certain way to be sure at this point if a paper is purely written by an AI bot. Whereas before, if they plugged this paper into a system that told them everything was copy and pasted, they could be sure about the fact that it was stolen. Whereas all the things that are written from AI are organic, or they seem organic, so there's no way to be sure. I think one thing I saw recently, some college TA had put in a paper or put in some text into a chat AI detector, and it came back and said that it was written by an AI bot, but it actually ended up being the U.S. Constitution. So
Oh, that's funny.
yeah. So I think it's too early to tell how we're going to get checks and balances going, but I think we're already going in the right direction. Do you think we're going to keep getting walls put up to chat AI to the point where it slows progress down? Or do you think that we're going to figure it out as we go, at least in the academic realm?
I think it's one of those things where they'll treat it like the plague, especially in the academic realm. And to go back to your point of someone using it to write a paper, actually, whatever the program is, I can't remember the name of the program, because we used to have to upload our papers and our assignments to this program to make sure like it wasn't plagiarized. Whatever developers made that program, they have now updated it that it can detect whether an AI actually wrote a paper.
Interesting.
So I think it'll be growing pains, obviously. I think you'll see a lot of pushback in the sense that people are normally afraid of things they don't understand. So when you have someone that's working in a lab that's developing this AI, right? They know how it works in theory, or how they want it to work.
Right.
And I
Until
say
it
in
gets out of control.
theory, yes, because I remember that one movie where like the computer goes completely sentient, and they're like, I can't allow you to do that when they go to shut it off. So there's people around the world that'll think, AI will get to that point. But what I wanted to circle back to was that AI in the video game space. You're a gamer, I'm a gamer. Now that we're both older, it's a lot more sporadic. But the whole concept of this guy putting the chatbot or the AI, the advanced AI, because I would call it an advanced AI because video games already have AI components, into an NPC. And what I think of is, did this NPC only do those things at the command of the user? Or did it look like this NPC started to develop some sort of sentience?
I think that at this point, at least in that scenario, the bot was pegged to whatever parameter the individual set. So the actual freedom or the possible sentience that might have seemed to materialize came specifically from the dialogue. So I think the only part that might offer some potential answer to the sentient question at this point is whether or not the bot can actually respond in a way that seems organic. What's that called? The Turing test. You know, if somebody is engaging with a screen or something and they can't tell if the thing on the other side responding to them is a human or a robot, then that passes the Turing test. But I don't really know enough about AI to say what would make an AI sentient. I would say we're very far from that, at least in the open source realm. I mean, who knows what's going on behind closed doors? I'm sure there's all kinds of government programs and stuff going on that they're working on that sort of thing if they haven't already achieved it. But I will say, going back to the point about video games, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a sense of AI, or there's an era of AI that's already in video games. And I think that as we progress and explore the different possibilities in video games, we're going to see a completely new dynamic altogether. For instance, imagine you're walking around in a video game, an open world, right? And you find this character and you walk up to this character and you're engaging with them. You click the button to initiate a conversation. And this person is talking to you and you're responding to them through a microphone. You're actually physically talking to them and they are responding to you, matching whatever your tips and cues are or whatever you're asking them about. They're answering you in a cogent way that makes sense. And then you just go about your day, and then you go talk to your friend later and say, "Hey, I came across this NPC in the game that you're playing too, and it was a really interesting conversation." And then the person comes back that you're talking to and says, "Oh, no way! I had this completely different conversation with them." So in the future that I envision with video games, it's no longer going to be a linear gameplay where you walk up to everybody walks up to the same character and gets the same pre-script dialogue with that character. I think it's going to turn into a complete range of anything you ask will be returned to you in a way that makes sense, and you can go off and take that into the open world as you see fit.
That's an interesting concept. And as you were talking, like sharing your point, I was actually thinking about that. Like, okay, everybody would have a different experience, but then again, that makes me think, like, how would that affect the overall storytelling? Because that's what video games are. Mm-hmm. Aside from, mindless ones like Fortnite and Call of Duty that don't really have storytelling. Mm-hmm. But most of them are built off of storytelling and to convey a message and to teach some sort of lesson. So, like, for example, like with God of War Ragnarok, it shows the development of a character from their youth in the first God of War games all the way up until the most recent game, their development as a human being, and later on in the previous two games as a father figure. Mm. So that makes me wonder how AI could affect the gaming experience for the individual. Because if this AI, let's say, for example, 10 years from now, right? They release a game and it's like, okay, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure, I would say, because not everyone is going to have the same interaction with the NPCs. Is there an actual endpoint? You get what I'm getting at?
Yeah, and I agree with you. I don't think that linear games like God of War or Call of Duty are going to go away. I think that maybe there might be some ways that new AI gets integrated into those games, but I think that the example that I gave is going to be seen more in purely open world games, and I think that there will still be parameters set to where you can't just walk up to a random character and two people ask the same question and they get completely conflicting answers. Like, oh, hey, NPC number two, I'm just curious, where were you born? And then that NPC is going to make up a completely different story about where they were born and how they were raised and all that stuff. I don't think that's going to happen. I agree with you where that would make the gaming experience not as fun. I think that there will be set parameters, but what I was getting at is maybe you walk up to that character, NPC number two different people in the real world walk up to that NPC character and essentially ask the same question. Hey, where were you born? Instead of getting like both people experiencing the dialogue, well, I was born in such and such period and I was raised blah, 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 same script. I think it's going to be two different answers that are in the same vein of reality. So they talk about being born in the same place, but maybe they'll tell a story about how, instead of telling you a story about how their brother became a successful starship captain, maybe they'll tell you the story about how their mother was killed by some marauding asshole. You know what I mean? Like, so the backstory doesn't change. It's just how they respond in that given moment based off of whatever you ask them in a specific way. So I think that's super exciting because that'll make the game much more immersive, especially if we reach a point where you have a microphone that you can talk into and engage with characters as opposed to just clicking on a dialogue and making your choices on the D-pad or whatever.
Yeah, now that you actually expanded upon that example of like giving the backstory, it just made me think of on the fly how this could be utilized in the education realm. So if you think about it, let's say like I'm a classical history junkie and I'm a American Civil War junkie. I'm just envisioning AI being used to educate people through AI and virtual reality. In the sense that, let's say, for example, you have like a learning program and you, like you said, you have a microphone, right? And you click on, let's say, Abraham Lincoln, and you can actually talk to Abraham Lincoln. And the AI has set parameters that it'll give you responses based off of Abraham Lincoln himself. Like It scans the internet and it compiles all this information about Abraham Lincoln through his speeches, like his backstory and everything like that. Does that make sense at all? Do you think that could be feasible? That's how I see it growing at first. I think it'll need to take baby steps through academia before it actually goes mainstream.
Yeah, that's I think we're going to see that too, and I think that it's going to create a whole different generation of learning and how we think about learning and how we think about testing. I do also envision a time when we have, instead of having TAs who are human beings, maybe we have TAs who are virtually based, who can imagine having your own teacher's assistant who was at your fingertips any time of the day to engage with you, to take practice tests with you, to give you little quizzes or to ask questions, like all kinds of things. I think, we hear a lot of multi-billion, trillion-dollar corporation. Well, not $1 trillion. I think there's only a few trillion-dollar multi-billion-dollar corporations right now talking about how AI is going to generate all this insane revenue over the next 10, 15 years. And I totally can see that now just having this conversation with you. Because originally when I heard that, I'm like, yeah, I guess there are lots and lots of ways for AI to expand into the market. But just this conversation, just think about how big the education sphere is in this world and how big the video gaming sphere is in this world. And that's only 2 market points. So I'm not trying to break off on a tangent with market value and whatnot, but I just get back to your point. I think that there is going to be, as time goes on, there's going to be an insane amount of educational and recreational value that comes from AI. And I can see it quickly getting to a point where it excites everybody and makes everybody really, just happy to experience the world in a different way. Like, talking to Abraham Lincoln, like you said. But I also think that there's potential for it to get a little bit out of hand. For example, people cheating on papers. And see, that's the amazing thing about advancing in technology, isn't it? Technology, every time we think about some way to advance our civilization in a way that technology has never been experienced before, or in modern culture or modern memory, there's always two sides to it. You know what I mean? Like AI is either going to lift society up to new heights, or it's going to set us back by 100 years. And I don't know, man. But hopefully, what I'm hopeful about is every time we come across this question again, we always prove ourselves right, and we always find ways to end up advancing society instead of setting it back. I just got to wonder if and when there will be a tipping point. Maybe in the next 50 to 100 years, probably after we're already gone, we'll start seeing either a new golden age, or maybe it'll be a dystopian wasteland. We'll see.
So it's good that you mentioned that, because it segues right into the next point I wanted to talk about, which is artificial intelligence in our society. Because our society, the way that it is right now, the way that it's built, to me, I think AI is used in not a massive capacity, but it's used in a supplementary way. For example, like if you're a pilot of a plane, right? You'll set the autopilot mode because you're not going to steer the damn plane for 15 freaking hours.
Yeah.
Like assembly lines and stuff, they have like robotic arms and stuff like that have to use AI, some sort of AI programming in order for it to function. So as a society, we use it to supplement our society. Where do you think, if AI follows the growth pattern of the internet when it first came out, where do you think that will lead us?
I honestly think it's going to go in two different directions. I think that, first of all, nations are going to inherently try to do with it what they always do with new advanced technology, which is weaponize it. And I think that we've already seen that to a certain degree in the deep fake world, with photos and videos, and trying to manipulate populations. Fortunately,
For the people that are not familiar with deep fakes, you want to go a little bit into that?
Yeah. So just briefly, so essentially what a deep fake is a video or a picture that is heavily manipulated. Possibly you can even argue that it's manipulated by AI itself if you have the right programming, but it essentially makes a photo or a video look like something that isn't actually happening or didn't actually happen. For example, let me think of a non-political example. Maybe I think there were some videos floating around where someone injected Leonardo DiCaprio's live figure overlaid it with a speech at the United Nations. I think that was the AI video I'm thinking of. But in a nutshell, that's basically what it is. So you just take an image or person or whatever you want, inject it into some video or some photo, and make it look like something that's happening that didn't actually happen. So someone's saying something that didn't actually say it. They can manipulate not only can you manipulate the lips to make it look like it's matching the audio, you can actually write the audio and make that audio sound just like the person who is actually in real life, how they actually speak. And I think that the weaponization between deepfakes and AI is going to reach a point in society where we can't tell the difference anymore. And there's going to have to be some serious way, just like the papers that you plug in these papers into for academia. You're going to have some way to check these videos and these photos to make sure they're actually real. Because imagine a situation where let me float something to you real quick. And I had a thought about this, and this is kind of getting into like the dark realm of AI. I know we're not quite there yet in the conversation, but it might spur some additional thoughts, because it necessarily doesn't have to be a bad thing. But I imagine if, like, for instance, the philosophical concept where you can't prove that I'm talking to you right now, right? Like I forget, is it Descartes? I think it was Descartes or somebody else who said, you essentially cannot prove anything outside your own consciousness. So when you're walking around in your daily life and you're interacting with people, there's no way for you to verify that those other people are actually other people like yourself, actually other consciousness. You can ask them questions just like AI, but they might come back to you with a response that, just like the Turing test, there's no way for you to tell if that person is actually a human being or an AI. So think about the fact that you can only prove yourself checking your own mind and your own thoughts as you existing, and that's the only proof you have. But if you have AI that is able to manipulate and make it look like other people are talking in a certain way or caring about, we're not at a point where we can't walk down the street in real life and they can trick us. But imagine a situation where you're at a distance where, you called me, you texted me, you called me, and you're talking to me right now remotely, but you can't see me, you can't touch me, you can't sense me in any other way other than hearing my voice.
Right.
So if AI can manipulate voices and someone can act as a middleman or a middle person between spoofing calls and whatever communications, there's no way for you to prove on your end, and me vice versa, that you're actually talking to the person you think you're talking to. So obviously that's not true right now because we're not at that level. Like who's gonna want to spoof Chris? Imagine a point in the next 20, 30 years where scammers get a hold of this technology, or political bodies use it to manipulate the masses into thinking that some crazy thing is happening in the world that they need to take political action on when it's actually not. So I think that that's going to be a colossal challenge that's not insurmountable, but I think that we're going to experience that in the next 20 years or so.
It's funny that you say that, like the concept of something being made up by the AI, right? And it's hard to discern whether this is fake or this is real. It reminded me of what I saw online a couple days ago, in which people were using AI to mimic the voices of dead musicians. And having the AI with the voice of the musician that passed away singing songs that came out just within the past year.
Yes. And you know what's really funny real quick about that is, that's already happened about 30 years ago. There was this whole thing where somebody in an ad, what was it? Was it Elvis or something? I remember there was this ad that came out a long time ago that was for vacuum cleaners, I think. And this company had subbed the dead actor or actress into it, selling these vacuum cleaners. And there was this whole big conversation for a long time about whether this is legal. Can you really use a dead person's persona to sell things? And I don't really know the legalese behind all that, but that just reminded me, we're always reliving the same rehashed crap over and over again. It's all just rehashed. So you're saying that you saw this video where, do you remember the artists that they superimposed and what song that they were singing from modern day?
Yeah, it was the Kanye West and Jay-Z song, and they used Biggie's voice. The AI used Biggie's voice. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wait a minute. Did Biggie sing this back in the day and they just did a cover? Or it wasn't until I did more digging and it was like, no, they used the AI to use Biggie's voice. Right. And it made me think of a situation where, let's say 30 years from now, I don't know, in some dystopian future, right? Let's go there. Let's go to the dark place, because why not?
Crap. Yeah.
Right? Where people are limited on what they know, what they can say, what they're exposed to. And you get the AI deep fake creation of some other country attacking a city, let's say, right? Mm-hmm. And then that spurs everyone's anger. It's like, oh, okay, we gotta go to war, we gotta go attack this country, when in reality, everyone in that city is actually fine. But the technology is so advanced that the government can use it to trick its citizens. Does that make any sense, or am I explaining this horribly?
Absolutely. The whole concept of a false flag operation has been around for probably 1,000 years or longer. And we saw it during the Gulf War, and we saw it up from, for example, during the War on Terror in the 2000s. So from the perspective of despots. I think so. We just went through a period where democracy got tested in ways that we never thought it would get tested, and people fell into certain camps that we never thought that they would fall into again in terms of certain beliefs, and certain beliefs bubbling to the top of certain groups of people being subjugated and targeted and whatnot. I think who would have thought 20 years ago we would revisit that in the 2020s or late 2000s. But essentially, going down the road of what you were saying with using these deep fakes and AIs to impose will or make people think something political is happening, or some big negative operation or harmful operation is going on against a certain people. We've seen that already where, let's say certain leaflets were dropped by certain governments for individuals to find, and these images were completely fabricated. I think there was one story where I don't know if it was the Taliban or maybe it was oh gosh, what's the other one?
I don't think the Taliban's using AI, dude.
Well, no. I'm just giving examples, not AI, but examples about how deep fakes have been used that can manipulate individuals. But essentially, a terrorist supporting group dropping leaflets saying that the Jews are responsible for 9/11 or something really bombastic and just like off the walls, unbased. That was enough to generate a lot of fervor and a lot of anger and saber rattling to get people behind what they wanted. The number of people they wanted to get behind them, or that they needed to get behind them. So that was just a mild example. That was just a leaflet that maybe had a picture of, I don't know, some Jewish, maybe a Star of David's, near some center that got attacked or whatever. And that was enough to drive those people off the walls and get behind this movement. Right. So I envision a situation where AI is used to touch even more people and generate even more fervor and get people on the side of the wrong people.
Yeah, going back to your whole concept of, these leaflets and these other propaganda tools being used with really basic technology, it makes me think how this could be utilized in the future to spread propaganda. Because let's look at the previous US elections, right? You have two candidates that were probably not the best at articulating their points when you watch them debate, right?
Yeah.
But what AI could do with that whole concept of voices and everything, I guess the AI could take a sample of, let's say, the president's voice. Let's say this is 20 years from now, right? And someone can write up this prompt, or the AI could create this prompt, some sort of nationalistic prompt or whatever they're using for their campaign marketing. And that could be the new way for people to campaign.
Yes. See, that's what I'm most terrified about. I'm not necessarily afraid of the situation where we get some kind of deep fake or some AI generated photo or video that shows some kind of massive event, and then everybody believes that event. And no, all of that is verifiable. For instance, there were some recent photos that were released of Trump that was supposedly, several days after he was indicted, it showed him being arrested and tackled and running away from police on the streets of New York or somewhere. And they all looked pretty real. I mean, there kind of ways you kind of look at it closely and like, that doesn't quite look right, but it was pretty realistic looking. I don't doubt for a second that there were plenty of people out there who may or may not be Trump supporters who believed those photos. Did it generate some anti-government sentiment in those people? Probably. Did it bolster their cause a little bit? Probably. There's probably still people who believe it actually happened. And there are probably people who are, there are militia groups out there in the U.S. training harder than ever because of it. But are they going to the Capitol, or are they dethroning the current political leaders and attacking random people in society right now? Absolutely not. Because I think most people are smart enough and will be smart enough to know this might be a trick. This might not be true. And also there's the comfort factor where, we live in a modern society of comfort and complacency. And I think that actually surprisingly, as much of a stagnant factor in humanity as complacency might be, I think that might actually be a saving grace for us because, imagine a situation where we do see someone trying to push out this false AI that shows some kind of massive event like an alien invasion or some nuclear bomb going off, 100 miles from them or something like that. I think honestly, at the end of the day, unless people see the issue with their own eyes in real life, I don't think most people are going to act on it. But what I'm terrified of is what you were just talking about, which is this slow manipulation of using AI of how things actually happened in the past. For example, imagine 100, and this isn't going to happen, but it's a really kind of a funny and crazy example, but imagine if we manipulated and twisted the persona of Abraham Lincoln to the point where 100 years from now, we're all using AI and we're all learning about Abraham Lincoln through AI, but he's wearing a Hawaiian t-shirt, sunglasses, and going, "Hey, dude, I emancipated the slave." You know what I mean? Like, it's like, yeah, there's some air of truth in it, but at the end of the day, how do we know after this slow manipulation that the things in the past actually happened the way that they truly did happen? And how is that being twisted slowly over time to people in power's advantage?
Right, because if you think about it, back to your point of, I'm glad you brought this up, how there will be some people that'll believe it no matter what, and some people that'll naturally be skeptical and question everything unless they see it with their own eyes. But I think what these applications like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, all of these applications that use algorithm to essentially curate content for these people. Could you imagine an advanced AI taking the place of that and just feeding you all of this content that, let's say, if you're on the radical left or radical right, or you are just batshit crazy and you believe that, there's like lizards living in the moon or something, right? They might be. I don't know. I'm not bashing anybody, but that's actually one of my favorite conspiracy theories, like the lizard people. But back to my point of curating all of this information, or one can say misinformation. That's where I think these companies that are investing into AI and all of this machine learning and everything like that, they could definitely use that to their advantage. Like we saw with Facebook feeding all this bullshit to people.
Yeah. And thank whatever power you want to thank that there are very smart people out there, but much smarter than us, who are much more engaged in the advanced technology side of humanity right now, who are actually watching out for such things. And I really do believe that, even though I'm sure everybody's motivated by their own personal beliefs and desires and whatnot, I still do think that it's not all doom and gloom. I think that there are a lot of very smart people out there who are very much aware of these issues that we're talking about, and they're actively engaged in ways to counter these potential downfalls in the future. But that's not to say that we might not see another, cyber Hitler kind of come up in the next however many years, decades or whatever, who finds a way to skirt their way to the top and to manipulate the system to the degree that it causes a massive upheaval in society. But I don't think we're anywhere near that, thankfully, at this point. And I do think that there are people who are actively engaged in keeping that from happening. For example, I think that there were a lot of tech entrepreneurs, very wealthy, very intelligent people who signed a petition to Congress, and it obviously didn't do anything. But they signed a petition to Congress to put a hold on AI development, and kind of put on a de facto ban on any advancement or release of AI, because I think probably, there's always the fear of the black swan event, where someone is able to manipulate AI to the point where we see a massive upheaval in society, or some crazy thing happens where all the nukes are activated somehow or whatever. That's a very low probability, high threat concern. But I think that what's more likely to severely impact society as a whole and actually cripple it to a degree that sets us back quite a bit is in the education realm, and how it's going to affect people's social engagements and how they advance themselves personally. I think that we're going to, for example, a lot of people are concerned about artificial intelligence in virtual reality, because when you make virtual reality better than real reality, who's going to want to leave virtual reality? But we still have physical requirements in our body that need to be met. And we have not just physical, but also psychological requirements. So can you imagine like being in an AI system for like 24 hours, living it up, having a good time, engaging with false personas, but then you have to take off your headset to go to the bathroom and eat food? I would imagine a lot of people would take off that headset. Not a lot, maybe some would take off that headset and just immediately crumble into a panic attack, because like, oh crap, this is the actual reality. This is what I actually have to deal with. And I just want to go back to virtual reality. There were actually some stories recently within the last like decade or so where you hear about these kids in different countries, maybe even America, go to internet cafes and play, or even in their apartment, they would play like World of Warcraft or some game, the MMORPG or something that would take up their whole time, and they would literally die. They would literally very physically die in their chair playing the game because they were not sustaining themselves with water, sleep, or food. And that's already happening. So can you envision a situation where individuals are so enamored and engaged in virtual reality because of AI and because of the way that AI can make things look so real and enjoyable, that many, many more people will succumb to that? I don't think that's going to be society ending, but I think it's going to create a lot of sad stories for a lot of people over the next like 20 years or so.
It's funny you bring that up, because I think that's already happening. Like your video game example with these internet cafes and these MMORPGs. And one thing I want to say is I think advanced virtual reality with advanced AIs will probably take the place of social media.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you look at social media, and I've always wanted to do a podcast on this, but it gets to the point where you just get so frustrated, right? Because if you look at social media, we use social media in its infancy. We had MySpace. Yeah, we had MySpace. Facebook when it first came out, Instagram when it first came out, all of these applications before they turned into these giant algorithm feeding human validation applications, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's all it turns into. People post a picture on Instagram and, oh, I didn't get that many likes, I'm miserable. So it's directly correlated with their mood and how they feel about themselves. So if we transplant that into a virtual reality system where this person lives their perfect life, like most people like to do on social media, they like to post these pictures and everything like they're living the most perfect life, when in actuality, they're all living for validation at some form or fashion. And I know some people will get pissed off of that, but that's what most people do. I mean, we're human beings. We all enjoy validation to some point.
Yeah,
but when it gets
human necessity.
Exactly. But when it gets to a point where it replaces your human interaction, your social interaction with people, then that becomes a problem. It's already happening with our smartphones and social media. I think that'll just become worse with the advent of advanced virtual reality and advanced AI. And it makes me think of, not sure if you're a fan of Star Trek, but they would have these holodecks where they'll put in like a code and it'll generate a holographic world where they want to be in at that moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it could turn into. But one thing I wanted to talk about now that we're on, society and AI, do you think that AI could replace the human workforce? Because the reason I ask that is like Elon Musk and Tesla is pushing like hardcore for self-driving vehicles and self-driving trucks.
Yeah.
And I don't know if like in the Air Force, they're actually pushing for self-driving or self-flying fighter jets. I personally think it's important to have a human being. I know we're all susceptible to human error, but I think just solely relying on AI for those functions could lead to disaster.
There's a really funny episode, a very old episode of The Simpsons, It's a,
Simpsons did it.
yeah. Oh my God, man. They're prolific. They are prolific for sure. And just as a little side thing, The Simpsons has been one of my favorite shows ever since I was a little kid, and it's still, I have to say, it's still my favorite show today, even though I don't really watch it anymore, because some of the humor is just so, it carries on so well into the future. Anyway, there was this one episode where Bart gets sent to a military academy, and I think it was called the Bart of War. Episode was called the Bart of War, and Lisa ended up talking her way into wanting to go to the military academy as well. So at the very end of the episode, when they were graduating, the commandant was giving his speech to the graduates, and I can't remember. Let me just give me 1 second. I'm going to look up the script because it's too good to mess up. Okay, I got it. So it's actually not the Bart of War. It's actually from the episode called The Secret War of Lisa Simpson. And the speech goes like this. The commandant is standing in front of the cadets and for graduation. He's like, and as you go forth today, I want you to remember one thing. The wars of the future will not be fought on the battlefield or at sea. They will be fought in space or possibly on the top of a very tall mountain. In any case, most of the actual fighting will be done by small robots. And as you go forth today, remember always your duty is clear to build and maintain those robots.
Yeah, so that's what we're going to turn into.
Oh man, and I just came across this really awesome quote, and I should have annotated it. I cannot remember who said it or where I saw it, but there's basically this this quote from someone in the past, very smart, who came up with this idea that eventually human beings will reach a point where we'll look around and we'll be like, what's all this fighting and all this war preparation and uncertainty and doubt generating, war fighting and all that stuff? It's just getting in the way of our advancement. So I think maybe that's the way we're going to go, where we do reach this point where everything becomes automated and there's like 90% automation in war fighting. So it's literally just robots fighting robots, and whoever, it's a war of attrition. Whoever destroys so many assets and robots in a given amount of time is the winner. And then no one's actually dying, and you're just wasting all this time and resources to upkeep and build these automated systems. So everybody just looks around and goes like, why the fuck are we doing this again? And then everyone just focuses on advancing in the future.
One can only hope that happens, because I feel like I've reached that point. I look at all the conflicts going around and I say, what the hell is the point? It doesn't make any sense to me, especially when you look at, not to go too far off topic. I promise I'll circle it back here once I'm done. When you look at people saying like, oh, China's the enemy of the US and Russia's the enemy of the US. No, it's the old bastards in government that don't like each other.
Yeah.
Dude, we went to grad school essentially at the same time together. We were different programs, but we've interacted with international students. I've interacted with Chinese students in my previous line of work. I've interacted with mainly international Chinese students. I've never had a problem with any of them. I don't have a problem with Chinese people. I don't have a problem with the Russians. I don't have a problem with the average Iranian person, right? And it seems to be something within these old people that have this old world mentality that flexing their muscle militarily and politically is still the way to go. But I think if you see the way people react online to like certain things and certain tragedies, of course you'll have your trolls and your dickheads. But most people are like, what the hell is the point? Like, nobody wants this. When you see World War III trending on Twitter, like, people are making memes out of it. They're not saying, oh, we got to gear up and we got to strap up. No, they're making Call of Duty memes. And everyone across the world ends up doing that. And that tells you one thing, that what you said earlier, that we're definitely slowly but surely moving to that line of thinking. But what I wanted to circle back was to your point of in the robots fighting, right? That perfectly segues into AI potentially being the harbinger of doom, right? Because let's say we do the future battlefield is robots fighting each other. They have to have some sort of AI capacity in order to function, right? For automation. what if there's a scenario where the robots just, we're viewing the battlefield, right?
Mm.
And the robots just stop fighting.
Yeah.
And they just, in all unison, they just say no. And then they turn around to go back to their home bases and they just start lighting our asses up.
Yeah, there are a lot of components to unpack there, which I don't mind doing. I would say that if you're talking about just autonomous robots who carry, say, machine gun firepower or grenade firepower or whatever, or even just drones that carry payloads. And this is my own opinion. I don't really know anything about this. This is just something that I envision being required. I think that level of conventional warfighting, where you're just talking about small grenades or munitions or whatever, I don't think that we would ever. I don't think superpowers would ever build en masse those types of robots to house a capacity of self-thinking, or that can house a capacity of sentient thought. I think when they talk about AI at that level, they might just have, like we talked about before, a set of parameters where, you know, this is what the bad guy looks like, use facial recognition. I know this is really bad because it's probably going to touch on like racism or whatever, but like, or maybe they won't even use facial recognition. Maybe they'll like use some kind of other way. So maybe like, this is the uniform. This is what the uniform looks like of the enemy. If you detect in your parameter or your field of vision, this uniform, let's say above 3 people, where 3 humans wearing this uniform, then engage and to kill, right? So I don't think that those little robots, if we ever get to that point, will ever house the capacity to be like, why are we doing this? I don't like killing. Let's go kill our masters and everyone. I think that for that to happen, you would have to have some kind of central hub of sentient AI, or some kind of central hub of AI that becomes sentient, that then decides not only to stop the engagement, but also decides that humanity itself is not worth doing this for and therefore must be eradicated. There's a lot of rabbit holes, I think, that has to be traveled down before AI comes to that conclusion. And I also think that we are smart enough as human beings, even though we don't understand AI, you know, we're way beyond our full understanding of what AI is right now. I still think that we're smart enough to inject some kind of kill switch or some kind of mechanism. You can always send a nuclear weapon up into space and blow it up and create an EM pulse that's big enough to knock out all the electronics in like an entire hemisphere. So I essentially think that that I wouldn't worry too much about the militarization of AI turning on us. But what I am terrified of in terms of an end state for humanity coming from AI is the integration of all of our infrastructure. For example, not a lot of people are aware of this, but as of right now, the East Coast of the United States is all integrated electronically, or the electrical grid is all integrated along the East Coast of America. So I don't know if you remember, Chris, but I think it was like probably when we were in grad school, maybe when we were in undergrad, so like 2010s or whatever, early 2010s, the whole grid went down on the East Coast for like a day or two. Remember that? And people were trapped in elevators.
Yes.
That to me, that type of integration, and as we keep integrating our water systems and our electrical systems and our traffic network systems and et cetera, I think that all this cloud computing and being able to touch all areas of this integrated network, that is what I could really see AI doing to us. Maybe not intentionally. I don't think AI in the near future is ever going to be like, screw humanity, I'm going to send it back to the Stone Age, and then just shuts everything off. I think what might happen is AI makes a critical error in its decision making, and then it ends up shutting things off long enough to the point where we just completely collapse. Can you imagine if the grid went down on the East Coast, affecting millions and millions of people for more than 2 weeks? No, just think about what that would mean. No refrigeration, no hospital backup, no infrastructure to get around, no traffic lights, no communications for law enforcement. It would immediately be martial law. You know, imagine if AI didn't itself make that decision, but imagine if a government, not necessarily the US, but a government in the world decided to do that false flag operation that made it seem like another country attacked and shut down the grid, or the government itself shut down the grid to impose martial law So an individual who was in power wanted to seize power. And that's, in my opinion, I think that the mass manipulation via AI is going to be the next really critical tipping point for humanity in terms of whether or not we're going to advance as a society. Because I don't know if you remember during the Trump coming up and whatnot, all these people were so concerned about whether or not guns were going to be taken away. And if the guns are taken away, we have no way to defend ourselves. So imagine a situation where individuals who may no longer have access to certain arms and ammunition, instead of having what people were originally afraid of, like, people coming in, physical humans kicking down their door, like police or military, and ordering them around. But people forget that those military personnel and law enforcement personnel that they're so afraid of, that they might be afraid of in that situation, are their neighbors. And probably they themselves are a part of that group as well. So, we're like back in Nazi Germany, it was really easy for Hitler to create, maybe not easy, but he managed to create a whole branch of secret police and who took orders from him and all that stuff. But our society is so far away from capably being able to do that because of how integrated we are as a society and how we're very intermixed in terms of our ideas and our jobs, like, law enforcement and military. I don't think there's any way that anybody in political power can manipulate individuals to the point that they can order them around to go take over large areas of population. However, what I can envision happening with AI is the government, through one singular node, initiating some false flag, not the US government, by the way, any government, some false flag operation that makes it look like somebody or something is attacking society. And then that's when that individual or small group of individuals issues orders to either robots or human beings or both to carry out their commands and impose, sanctions or impose their will on society. I think that might be that's a black swan event, low probability. I don't think that that's going to happen anytime soon, if it does happen at all. But I think that is a major concern that AI brings to the table.
Dude, those are some amazing points that you brought up. And you actually answered a bunch of questions that I had in my head of how, like, a government, not necessarily ours, could potentially use AI in a negative way to push forward a specific agenda or a specific, political or governmental change, right? But I do have one final question for you before we wrap up today. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation we've been having about AI and everything else included. What I wanted to ask you is, in your honest opinion, where do you think we go from here as a civilization with AI? Because I'm always a pessimist when it comes to this stuff. I think AI could potentially lead to the downfall of our civilization if we're not careful. But where do you think it's going to go? Do you think it's going to lead to a positive change or lead us down a path of destruction?
I think, just like anything else technologically, I think that we're going to just go, and this is not what I want. This is what I think is going to happen, or should happen. I think the way it's going to go is we're just going to, as a free society, have all kinds of really smart, brilliant individuals traveling out in different branches and different methods to kind of hurry up and monopolize, or not monopolize, but monetize. Capitalize or monetize AI, constantly pushing the edge and creating really advanced, amazing things that will help society. And then I think that quietly in some room in some other nation or wherever, people are going to be studying this and figuring out how to weaponize it and how to counter weaponize what other people are doing. I think it's neutral right now. I think we're in a gray zone for sure. I think that I am more hopeful. I'm more erring on the side of hope, because I think as we figure out AI and how to integrate it into society in a positive way, I think that it's going to create a monumental shift in how people view the world. And like we talked about earlier, I think that eventually I like to hope that even if we go through one more last growing pain of war or something or whatever, I think that there's going to be light at the end of the tunnel with AI, because I think that there are all kinds of amazing ideas that are going to advance not just academically for society, but I think that there are going to be ways for AI to utilize cutting down on world hunger, cutting down on the water issue. I can't feasibly think about how it could positively affect climate change at this point, but who knows, maybe with cloud seeding and changing or detecting certain patterns and essentially telling the future. Because imagine we get to a point where we have supercomputers who can calculate insane sums of data in a matter of milliseconds, married up with advanced technology and AI that can then kind of de facto see the future through mathematical probability and mapping and generating cloud data that is built up over time and recycled and analyzed over and over again to the point where we completely understand everything within the sphere of our world in the physical sense, that we could then manipulate it to our advantage. Because I do think, I don't know what camp you're in terms of climate change, but I do personally think that I don't know if we're past the tipping point, but I do believe there is a tipping point, because I sure as heck have already experienced it here in paradise. With the amount of rain that we've seen, way more rain than ever before. And I know people are getting all kinds of crazy experiences weather-wise in the Asia Pacific. And I think it's just going to get worse before it gets better. But I do think that AI has the potential to positively impact that and other portions of society. So that's kind of where I stand.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode of The Wandering Road. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and share with your friends. I hope you have a great day, and I look forward to you joining me for the next one.